Dr. Henry Cloud. So good to spend some time with you today. Welcome.
Good to see you, Carey.
Yeah. We've been chatting a little bit over the last little while at different venues, but man, I'll tell you, these are really different times. And I'd love to open up by finding out what are some of the mental and emotional issues you see leaders grappling with right now?
Well, it's kind of all over the map. I've seen you know, a lot of leaders are so, like instead of ready, aim, fire, they're like fire, ready, aim, just as people.
Yeah.
So the more action oriented ones, some of them are kind of going crazy because they feel like they can't go take charge of somebody, they can't
Right.
and so for some, they're experiencing it on that kind of the agitated side of the spectrum, and for others, they're experiencing it more, on the depression side of the spectrum. And so some of it has to do with the wiring of the person. Now, one of the things I'm worried about here is that what leaders tend to do is they will, and this happens without a pandemic, but leaders tend to create a team and an organization in their own image.
Hmm.
Okay. And what I mean by that is, and it's kind of the downside of the strengths movement, in a way, because when you think of somebody's strengths, like some are, they're real visionaries. Other people are real execution oriented. Others hold people accountable all the time. Some are great at putting teams together. Well, that's great, whichever one of those you're good at, but your organization needs all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you got great visionaries that never pull the trigger and do anything. You're just casting vision all the time, and these big ideas and all of this. And so emotionally, what I'm a little worried about, and I'm kind of interjecting with, is that people kind of deal with this in their default patterns.
Yeah.
And so if you're naturally somebody that is sort of action oriented, for example, you move into things and you push and you take charge. Well, if you're not taking the time to do some of the non-action oriented things, like sitting in a chair and going inside and processing what this really means to you and what it really feels like to you, and processing some of those maybe fears and vulnerabilities and losses and all of that, and you're just trying to action your way out of them, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And also what people don't realize is how much emotional states actually affect your decision making. One of the big popular psychology things out there that you hear that's a bunch of what is that you'll see these pop psychologists and some professionals actually, thinking determines your feelings and your behaviors. It all starts with thinking. Are you kidding me? I mean, no. I see this all the time. And that is true in the same way that being thirsty affects maybe how you feel. Right? But so does being hungry, so does sleeping, so does a death in your family, a lot of stuff. So thinking does affect all of that, but also the reverse is true. Thinking is not a primary process. We don't even start thinking till well into the second year of life. Your brain that part of your brain hasn't even wired and myelinated yet.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Many times feelings, actually, your feeling states affect your thinking.
Oh.
For example, somebody's had a loss, okay? And they haven't processed that loss, they start to think in very negative ways. Sometimes, depression itself has its own thinking patterns. Now, before all the cognitive behavioral people start, catching their hair on fire. The opposite is true as well. Your thinking does affect your feeling states. But I just worry, that people aren't, and with their teams as well, the action-oriented ones are not taking the process time that they need for this.
Yeah.
Okay? And then I also worry about the processors and the introverts and the conceptual people and the desert father types, and they get off on, all of that, which is good stuff. But at some point, you got to stop gazing at your navel and do something,
Right.
And so one of the things I'm worried about is that, see, external structure, teams and the tasks we have to do, you got to show up and preach a sermon, you got to plan that, or you got to make a sales call if you're in business or whatever it is. External life helps to structure us, and it kind of will keep us balanced when life is organized like it is. Well, you get in a lockdown, all those structures go away, and if they're not careful, people are developing patterns, in this pandemic that aren't going to serve them well later. And so I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking.
No, that's a really good entry point. I'd like to kind of explore both of that. I'd like to go back to
God says over and over and over, before there was neuroscience, well, I guess there was neuroscience in the beginning. I mean, Proverbs says wisdom was present when he did all this. But there's a phrase, and it says, observe your ways. Okay? Observe your patterns. Psalm 139 says, God, try my anxious thoughts. You see all the stuff out there today about mindfulness. Go back to Psalm 139. That's what it is. We're going to get above the anxious thoughts and notice them and observe them. And we're going to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. And we're going to transfer. See, there's a difference in the brain and the mind. And I want people to get out of their brains and into their minds and start thinking about your thinking. That's the difference in the people that succeed and get well and the people that are just operating according to their patterns. A German Shepherd barks, but a German Shepherd doesn't bark and then sit back and go, now I wonder if that was helpful. Should I have barked a little later? Does that get me where I want to be on Thursday? And see, humans have the capacity. So I want leaders to take some time out and say, what patterns am I establishing?
Right.
Am I doing the things I need to do to lead my people out of this? Am I doing the things I need to do to lead myself out of this, instead of just going on autopilot?
Some great observations to get us started. One of the learnings for me over the last 40 days is I've had a stereotype of anxiety as being a person who's anxious, maybe kind of sitting in the corner, cowering, intransigent. And someone pointed out to me that sometimes anxiety just leaks out in a number of other ways. So I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm a take charge kind of leader, particularly in crisis. And I had someone point out to me.
Well, actually, that is a strength in a crisis. We don't realize, and this goes back to leadership literature from way back, that leadership is field dependent. So whatever context or field you're operating in, there's no one size fits all context. And in a crisis, collaborative leadership, consensus leadership is the worst thing that exists. Because people need some structure in a crisis. And you got to go a little more command and control. So way to go.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, he said, because sometimes overworking can be an outworking of your anxiety. I guess.
Or depression.
Or depression.
People don't realize that there is something called an agitated depression. It's particularly in men. A lot of times they will express depression in much more agitated ways than lethargic ways.
Oh, then just lying around in bed and not getting up in the morning.
Yeah.
Interesting. How else does anxiety show up in leaders?
Well,
what other ways does it look at?
I interrupted you. You were about to say it shows up in some way that you were going to talk about.
Yeah, no, it just shows up in very different ways. So I do, I was doing long hours, trying to figure out, we had to pivot our company, and I was helping church leaders pivot their churches to online, et cetera, and just coaching a lot of leaders. And I didn't think of that as a way of trying to gaining control in anxiety. Another way, I know you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned to you offline that if you look behind me, I organized all of my bookshelves. And you said, "Oh, that's awesome. Like, you're bringing some order out of chaos." Like, I finally had some time to be able to do that. So what are some ways that anxiety shows up?
You're bringing order out of chaos, but the other thing that you were doing was you were doing some sort of self-initiated, proactive, autonomous, taking control of something that you could actually check off. And I could actually, if I had the right tools, I could go into your brain and show you different neurotransmitter systems that actually changed because you did that.
Isn't that interesting? Say more about that. What happens in the brain when you take control out of chaos?
Well, one of the things, and the big, there's two things here. If you do a factor analysis of that, you just talked about two different things. So you're taking control and you're bringing order to chaos. Okay, the order thing is a structured thing. Now think about this. If you've had kids, or you've ever gone into a classroom or preschool, kids that don't have any boundaries, they don't have any order, they don't have any structure, they're crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, they're bouncing all over the walls. Many times you see, when I used to have treatment centers, we had acting out adolescents because their parents were not providing any structure and any boundaries in their lives. See, we internalize these functions. What was once on the outside becomes inside. So if I live in an ordered environment, then that's not too harsh to cause me to rebel against it, then I'm going to internalize that order. And now the boundaries that my parents gave me live in my head. They said no to me. Now I've got a voice inside that says no to me, that says, don't lie in bed, get up and go to work. Don't step off the curb. The toddler at some point starts to stop because mom's voice is in their head. We've internalized that order and it calms us down. And so you put an adolescent that's acting out in a structured treatment center where they finally have a schedule and places they got to show up, this, that, and the other. And you see all these, this stuff begin to calm down. And then the one thing you got to do is make sure you get the parents to do that after they're out of the hospital. Order is like coming and taking charge of a schoolroom. The kids finally sit in, and it calms them down. They'll bitch about it. They'll fight again. They'll a toddler, they're just screaming. But I used to say to my girls when they were toddlers, and it's the same thing with leaders now. When they would get agitated, right, and throw the toddler fit. Okay, you're going to have to use your words, but until you can use your words, you're going to go in timeout, okay? And when you can use your words instead of screaming, then you can talk to me, but I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about it. Now, remember, if you start screaming, the clock starts over, so I'm not going to talk to you till you've been quiet for at least a minute or whatever. Now, what I'm doing is I'm providing some order and it's calming the system down.
Mm-hmm.
That turns into self-regulation. So leaders right now, you've got to be providing some structure and some order, or your people are going to be swimming in chaos. And so that's the order part of it. Now, the other part you did was you took control of something. So when we have, as leaders and your people, when you're in an environment, which we are now, where things out of your control are affecting your well-being. I'm going to say that phrase again. Things out of your control are affecting your well-being. Then what happens is, in the technical term for this, and they discovered it back in the 70s or so, when they took dogs and I think it's dogs, And this is before PETA got in control of the earth and they shocked animals. You know? So they put them on this pad that gave them a mild shock, and they had a lever there, and they had, you know, they're on this pad, and they can't get out because there's a little fence around it. But if the dog hits the lever, the shock stops. Okay, so I'm in pain, but I do something, and my pain gets better. All right, well, that's the way we're wired, to have control. If you're hungry, you do something, you go make a sandwich, you get better. All right, now here's what they did. Then they unhooked the lever. So they're shocking the dogs, and now the dogs hit the lever. There's nothing they can do to stop the pain. So the dogs' brains begin to shift, and they go into this thing called learned helplessness, where now they're not doing anything because it doesn't help. And then here comes the kicker. All right. They took the fence away. They shocked the dog. All the dog's got to do is take 2 steps to get off of the pad. And they don't do it because their brain has shifted and believed the message. There's nothing I can do that's going to make a difference.
Wow.
Now you take that and you're getting shocked. You can't affect the pandemic, but your brain doesn't know the difference in the pandemic and your own to-do list. It just throws the switch and it shuts down. That leads to depression. It leads to anxiety, and it leads to something called a cognitive interpretive style. And when leaders get this, they're screwed. Because what happens is you start to interpret events in what we call the 3 Ps: personally, pervasively, and permanently. So in other words, you look at your donations that week, that's an event. You go online, donations are down. 3 Ps. You interpret that personally. Oh, I didn't do it good enough. I'm such a loser. Why didn't I prepare for this? We should have had cash reserves. Why didn't I should have given the announcement earlier. You start to feel bad. Pervasive. It's not just the donations, it's the worship. You know, it's my staff. I should have fired 4 people before. Why did I even open up in the city? I hate my family. You know, everything goes bad. It turns into this subjective awfulness. And then the third thought that comes in there, and this is so predictable, the software does this, is it's not going to be any different next month. And now it's permanent. And so that all comes from a loss of control. So what you did, you added order, but you also took charge of something. Very important.
No, that's so good to know, because sometimes I think it's my neuroses working themselves out, but I felt a lot better after. I'd love to ask you.
Well, here's your neuroses. Is when there's nothing wrong with the world and your office is fine and you got to go invent something to organize. We call that OCD. That's not
That's great. What's happened to almost everybody is their world got torn upside down. They're working out of their home, and there was a rhythm to life, whether it was an ideal rhythm or not. It's like you go to the office, you drop your kids off at school, go to a restaurant Friday night for date night. And now people are in lockdown. In most cases, you know, America is starting to slowly open up again, but life is not going to get to any semblance of normalcy soon. And the kids aren't back in school, and the daycare isn't open. And so in that sense, the boundaries that people had established before all got kind of blown out, or the rhythms. Any advice for leaders who are now dealing with a whole new rhythm of family life, of how to bring, you know, some semblance of sanity and health into that place where you're working, where you're living, and your kids are there, and then you got to make dinner, and everything we've come to know isn't operating the way it should be?
Yeah, it's a really important point, because think about this. You know, God has designed all of life to work with you're talking about structure, basically.
Yeah.
And so you think about this. He made days and nights. It's the first structure. There's a time for work. There's a time to put work away, right? Days and nights are the first, and that affects your well-being. If you don't have those, do you know that we don't even allow bipolar executives, if somebody's got any kind of mood disorder like that, we don't allow them anymore to fly across time zones.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because your circadian rhythms that your mind operates on, these are all metabolic functions that God designed to be in a structured cycle. Okay. People start jumping time zones, it can trigger a manic episode.
Did not know that.
Because the biochemistry changes. It's the reason that all the research shows on high performers, forget the crisis. If you don't have regular go to sleep and wake up times, you are not performing at your highest level. And they take people that say, well, I don't need much sleep. You know, I only need 5 hours a night and I'm a high performer and blah, blah, blah. Well, shut up, Tarzan breath, because we put you in a sleep lab. Literally, they put them in a sleep lab where they don't have control anymore and their body just gets the sleep it needs. Their performance goes up.
Wow.
I mean, they're leaving so much on the table by not resting enough. So God designed it. And then you got the weeks, and then you got the Sabbath, and then you got, you know, organized rituals that he gave us and all this. That produces a sense of order, which drives metabolic functioning, including the way your brain works, as well as your heart, mind, and soul. And so if you're not creating these rhythms, as you're talking about, in the absence of their being created for you, then you're just looking over a pit that you're going to fall down into. And especially the people that are depending on you to do it. And that's your family in the question that you brought up.
Yeah. And
so it's really, really important. And you know, what we do around here, both my daughters are home. One's a sophomore in college, and the other is a senior in high school. And so we're all holed up here and have been for 6 weeks. But we're treating it. In the first week, we kind of didn't, and everybody was sort of starting to go crazy a little bit. But get up, get dressed, and go to work. So I come to my study. Tori goes and does her stuff. You know, the kids have their classes and all that. And then we aggregate for lunch. And we usually stand around the island. Everybody kind of makes with it whatever they're going to have. And then go back to work. And then at 6 o'clock or so, we all gather in the kitchen. It's prep time. And we have dinner. We have family dinner. And then we do game night. And we have had a blast.
Yeah.
I mean, an absolute blast. But you can't, and you know, I told them, look, guys, here's some blocks. I don't want to see you. Don't interrupt me, because I don't know how good my thoughts are, but whatever thoughts I have, I need to hold on to them when I'm in them. So don't interrupt me.
Yeah. You need some space.
You need some space. And that's another thing. I also have, what I've tried to do is about an hour before we go to the family kind of dinner thing, I try to have an hour of space for me. And you know, I just finished one series. I'm watching something else now because I got to unplug and get rid of all this. So rhythm and structure, really, really important. Really important.
We got one leader who wants to know, if you see stress behavior in your team, is there a way to help them get to a better place faster? How do you identify the remedy in real time? So leaders are not only navigating their own stress, they've got a whole team that they're responsible for. So tips for leaders on how to help the people they care about with their stress.
Well, the first thing is, he said, if you see stress behaviors in your team, if you're not seeing any, I'd be worried a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, because somebody's going to go bonkers denial, right? So the first thing I would do is I do a team thing where I really I go looking for it. You know, there are different kind of leaders. There are leaders that ignore problems, resist problems, don't give them bad news. They don't want to hear it. They're against any kind of negative reality. There are leaders that are not against it, but it's got to come find them.
Hmm.
So if you walk into my office with a problem or tell me you're stressed, I'll be fine and I'll join you and I'll deal with it. But then there are leaders that are the real leaders. They don't avoid, negate, stay away from, attack problems. They don't passively address problems when the problems show up. They actively go look for them. Okay? Jesus said this, I did not come to judge the world. Okay, leaders, don't judge the stress reactions that you're seeing. I came to seek and to save that which was lost. Seek, he came looking for the problem. Save means heal in the Bible. Greek word means heal. I came looking for the stuff that needs healing, and the stuff that needs healing is that which was lost. Now, lost in the Greek does not mean God can't find us. Oh, where did I put the humans? I lost them. I think they're over there. I think I left them by the keys. They go.
Yeah.
The Greek word for lost, it's not just a Baptist, fly down to the altar at the evangelistic meeting. Lost means broken beyond repair. Okay, so here's our leader. I'm looking for the things that need healing that are broken in people that they're not able to repair themselves.
Wow.
So if you're a leader, in my book Integrity, it's the character trait called embracing the negative reality. You're not waiting for problems. You're not fighting problems. You're looking for them.
So you look for them, you find them.
You look
How
for
do
you start with calling your team together? Okay, guys, I'll start this. We're going to have about 10 or 15 minutes here where we're going to really take everybody's stress reactions and how this thing's feeling, and let's put it all out on the table. I'll start. I wake up at 3:14 every night. And I'm sitting there and I got 18,000 things going through my head, and I don't know what to do with it, but here's what I've tried. All right. Or I find myself blah, 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 blah. Or, I'm snapping at my kids, or, I'm drifting online to mindless articles, or, it's harder to let that bikini clad ad fly by as fast as I used to, or whatever. And so you go first and you say, how's this affecting everybody? So you're seeking it, you're looking for it. Okay. And then there's going to be some individual cases that you can get more prescriptions for. But here's what I want you to do. If somebody's got a headache, all right, and I'm looking at them and they're banging their head up against the wall and they're saying, oh, my head hurts, my head hurts. Well, first, before I send them to a neurologist, I'm going to say, well, there's a nail in your head. Remember that video?
Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah, stop.
There's
Stop
a nail in your
head up against the wall. Stop banging your head up against the wall. And then if they have a headache, after that, we're going to take the next step and maybe go do a CAT scan. All right, so, but when I was talking earlier about all these things to do, before we're worrying about what to do about people's stress problems, let's do what we know is going to help. Let's start doing the connecting. Let's add some structure. Let's give them some control of some things. Let's do the mindfulness work of how are you thinking about this, and let's drive the thinking of this. Let's put this in a bigger narrative about what God is doing and what this opportunity is. And are we going to be the 10 spies that look over the fence and say, they're so big, the monsters are we going to be Joshua and Caleb? And how are we going to interpret this reality? Is this the biggest opportunity we've had since Calvary? Or is this your petty little dreams are crashing and you don't get to do the worship songs like you wanted to do them?
Right.
I mean, come on, right? There's a loss to that. We need to cry about it for a minute. But there are people, Carey, that are killing it right now in ministry because they're seeing this like Joshua and Caleb did.
Yeah.
When I was working in '08, in the financial crisis, and I do a lot of work on Wall Street, and one of my clients was the CEO of one of the big banks, you know the name, and he told me one day, he said, I got 10,000 brokers out there and they can't even function. They're so, because everything, I don't know if people remember how bad it was, but it was
I
bad.
remember. I'm old enough. Yeah.
Yeah. McCain was going to call off the election.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And Obama wouldn't agree to it. But that's how bad this thing was. Yeah. And so he said, can you do anything for them? Well, I said, yeah, but I got to go figure out what we're dealing with first. And so he puts me on a plane. I fly to 20 cities. And I said, I want your highest performers in a room, and I'm going to spend a day. I'm going to fly to 20 cities, and I'm going to unpack what this has done to them and how it's affecting them and how it's affecting their clients. Okay. The symptoms we were seeing, it's the same thing. You got a pandemic, it's a financial pandemic, then, but it's affecting the way they lead and perform. And same list of symptoms and, all this stuff. But I'm also studying, there are some that are thriving in this thing.
Yeah.
Now, I would have one guy sit there and say, and this would be somebody's Barron's top 50 in the industry, say, I just sit there and I'd stare at my computer for an hour and I hadn't gotten anything done, or I'm afraid to pick up the phone and call a client and all of this. But there were people that were thriving. And so you start to look at their behaviors and what they were doing. And there are all the stuff we've been talking about. And so I developed a program. We flew 500 branch managers into Dallas, and I took them through it. I developed a small group program. They went back and took 10,000 brokers, their teams, through this program, and the performance it turned around, and the mood turned around and all this. But some of it was as simple as a mindset shift on what you're talking about here. I remember a guy said, I have won every award in this industry for 20 years. I can't even call my clients. And I said, why can't you call me? He said, because they all hate me. I said, they all hate you? He said, yeah, all of them are mad. They think I caused this. I can't even call. And I said, wait a minute, how many clients do you have? He said, 250 or so. I said, and they all hate you? And he said, yeah. I said, well, how many clients do you think there are in Manhattan? He goes, well, there's millions. I said, dude, you just won the lottery. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, you got 250 people that think you caused this, you ruined their life, and they hate you, and they're looking for a new guy. That means all those millions hate their guy, and they're looking for somebody new. So you better get out there and gather all those assets that people are looking for a new guy. I said, I'm going to give you 2 simple things to do, and you can take control of this. Every PTA meeting, every church gathering, every cocktail party, when you're standing at the punch bowl, I want you to ask the guy you're standing next to or the woman you're standing next to, so are you happy with the financial results you've gotten in the last year? What are they going to say?
Disaster.
Oh gosh. Well, that's what I do. If you want a second opinion, I'll be glad to look at it for you. All right. All of a sudden, he has the best year he's ever had. Now, why do I say that?
Yeah.
Because we see church leaders doing the same thing right now.
Yep.
Some of them are having the best year they've ever had. because they've shifted and seen the harvest is plentiful right now.
Oh, yeah.
Carey, I'm a golfer. I play golf a lot competitively and all this. I have all these, probably most of my friends around here are non-believers.
Yeah.
I got the craziest, wildest non-believing friends calling me right now going, dude, is this like does the Bible, is this the end of the world? Is this when it happens? Like everybody's seeking right now.
Absolutely. Henry, I talked to one guy, I don't want to name him because I don't know whether he wants to go on the record, but he leads a very large church and has a massive online following.
Just
What's
call
that?
him. Let's call him and pipe him in.
We'll call him. I'll see if he's available. I forget whether he said this on the air or off the air, but it'll be on my podcast. So I'll protect his identity. But he said it's going so well right now. He's wondering about whether he should open up his buildings again because online is going so well. And I'm like, that's the way to see this challenge, because I know so many other leaders who are like, if we can just hang on till we get back in, if we can just hang on till we get back in. And I'm like, man, you're like admitting defeat before the game is even over. It's like not even halftime and you're done. Like, I don't get it.
And how did he put it?
He said he's had 10x growth in the last 6 weeks.
No. The other one. How did the defeatist express it?
Oh, the defeatist is they're just hanging on. Like, I can't wait to get in my building. Once I get in my building, everything will go back to normal.
Yeah.
And we'll just, then I know how to lead in that context.
Yeah, that's like the CEO of Borders 10 years ago and going, well, once people start coming back in buildings to buy books, then we'll succeed. And it may not happen, right? Yeah. Or at least we don't know. We don't know.
Don't hold your breath.
Some people are seeing this as a great opportunity.
Yeah.
You think that God thought, oh, yeah, we had this gospel thing going until that coronavirus.
So much for that.
In the tribulation, he's going to have this big evangelistic campaign. We're not even close to the tribulation.
Yeah.
So those what is it, 100,000 evangelists? I forget my eschatology. However many is going to be out there.
Pre-post, amillennial, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I was a pan
millennialist.
It'll all pan out in the end is the way that I look at it. I never, Carey, I love theology. It's my first love. And I can go as deep as you want to go in superlapsarianism or whatever, except eschatology. I can't, I don't understand it.
I did a really good study on Revelation about 15 years ago, but like, I don't think I'm cracking that open anytime soon. But
I don't get it.
Fascinating when you go there.
I don't see how they look. It looks like almost psychotic process by Ezekiel or something. Some you'd want to medicate somebody out of there.
Now that he's off his meds, yeah, it's a whole genre. It's fascinating. I'd love to know. So that executive you were coaching, who won all the awards and said, "Everybody hates me. I got 250 clients."
Yeah.
Do you think that is a switch that any leader can flip from? Because there'll be people watching this who are like, I feel like I'm just clinging to like when I can get back into my building back to normal. Is there a switch you can flip to make you see the opportunity, not the obstacle?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
All right. Now here's what I mean by that. Is there a switch that can be flipped 100% yes? And don't take my word for it. Look at 40 years of empirical evidence where we've been studying this and flipping that switch all the time. All the time. I mean, this is what a good shrink does, who understands this.
Right.
And particularly in this area of what we call, I think Seligman called it learned optimism. Okay.
Right.
We know that we can change that switch, but I said we. So when I said yes and no, when you've got somebody in it and you said, can they flip that switch?
Right.
Does the drowning man save himself?
Right.
Not often, because you're asking them to flip the switch with a pessimistic switch flipper.
Yeah, he wouldn't have flipped his own switch. You're right.
He would have flipped it on a switch, and he's going to reach up for it and he's going to say, well, this will never work. Well, that's the switch you're trying to switch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. We need each other.
Okay. It's the second law of thermodynamics. Remember your physics?
Yeah.
Entropy, things get worse over time. Energy goes down, chaos increases, negativity increases, things are winding down, but that's only true in a closed system. So the way you reverse entropy is you open up the system to two things: a new source of energy and new intelligence, or a template to organize that energy. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter into that pessimist's head. We're going to say, just shut up and listen. And they're going to open up to what we got to say. And then you're going to enter in and you're going to give them new energy. You're going to support them. You're going to push them. Stop thinking away. Let's go do this. Let's go try it. We're going to get moving. Here's 3 things you can do today. And we're also going to add some structure and some new templates and some new intelligence of how to think. And now we're talking about an open system. And you can reverse chaos in an open system if you are an open system. So one of the things that leaders have got to do right now is exactly what they're doing when they're listening to you. They're opening their system to get out of their own heads and listen to outside energy sources and outside content, intelligence, new ways of thinking, all of that. So yes, it can be changed, but you can't do it as a closed system.
You're right.
And your team is a closed system.
Yeah, it eventually is. It becomes a feedback loop, right?
Right. So you gotta play a podcast for your team. You gotta join. I was on a call yesterday with Chris Hodges and 100 pastors, and he has calls like this, and other leaders have calls like these, where and your listeners do this, where you're getting outside of what you and your team is thinking, and you're getting with other leaders and seeing what they're doing. And we're joining, this whole thing. The definition of a cancer cell is a cell that disconnects from the healthy cells and has a life unto itself. And so this disconnected, closed system thing is going to kill people. There are some people that don't even know that there are churches that are thriving right now.
Right. Because they talk to their 2 friends who aren't. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons, Henry, I love doing interviews so much. I mean, I must be pushing 400 or 500 interviews I've done now in the last 5 years with leaders like yourself and many others. And I think it's one way, as I get older, of keeping my thinking fresh. It's just, I hadn't seen it that way. And I can't recite verbatim everything I've learned over the years, but eventually just reshapes your mind and reshapes your heart. And I find it so helpful.
And you know what? It's got to be a discipline too. I mean, one of the things. I try to go to. Here's a good discipline. I don't even choose this one. The Board of Medical Quality Assurance, state of California, requires me to get 36 hours of continuing education in each time period. So I love going to these classes that I'm required to go to. But that can't be enough. What is your regimen of how many books are you going to read this month?
Right.
How many podcasts are you going to listen to? If we don't have structured getting better stuff, and sometimes going back to the basics, I had the most incredible privilege. I got to spend a day with Jack Nicklaus.
No way.
A couple of months ago, got to play golf with him and go to have dinner and all this.
Oh, my dad will be so jealous. He's such a fan. So am I.
It was unbelievable. But here's the greatest ever. Okay, nobody's even close to Jack, and I'll argue that. And I love, they're in different eons. I like Tiger and Jack are. Nobody's in their leagues. Anyway, so I was talking to him about improvement. I was asking about, swing changes and all this stuff and how he got, and we were talking about a lot of this stuff. And here's what he said. I think it was 1979. I think it was 79. He said he had the worst year he'd ever had on tour.
Hmm.
He went back to his teacher that he'd always had, Jack Grout in Ohio. He went back to him and he said, teach me the game again. I want to start with the grip, the stance, how you hold the club, how I distribute, how you take it back. Start me from the beginning. And he worked on those drills from the beginning. He said that next year he won 2 majors.
Isn't that incredible?
Okay, now that's the best ever. And the scripture says this over and over and over, that not only do we need to be learning the new thing the Lord is doing in the next level and the next, in Hebrews it says that you should be ready for solid food, but you've come to need milk again. And so there are different levels of knowledge and growth, obviously, that we need. But he also says, go back and remind yourself of these basics over and over and over. And you see this juxtaposition of we've got to be reminded sometimes of the fundamentals, the grip and the stance. And also we've got to get to like Hebrews 6 says, leaving the elementary principles of the faith, like doctrine and baptism and justification and faith and repenting from dead works. It says we're going to leave those and go on to things that have to do with maturity. You see a lot of churches, they just do the elementary things for 40 years. They talk about, don't do bad things, repent from bad works, this is doctrine, and that's all they do. And they never leave the elementary things and take people to maturity. But you see other people that are always looking for the next shiny new thing.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost their fundamentals. And so I want, this is a time for people to be alive. And let's take the fundamentals and the new things and figure out how do we apply those to this new scenario. Don't be, just because the paradigm changes, you're an author. You didn't stop writing books when they went from buildings to digital. You got to change with it.
Yep. Yeah, you do. That's so good. Last question for you, Dr. Cloud. Any podcast or resources that you would recommend right now? I know you just produced one, but any other voices you're listening to or resources, or even maybe a book you wrote that could really, you think, wow, in this moment, this is a good one.
When I think about stuff that I've done in this moment, I think of 2 things. One is the Churches That Heal program. Mm-hmm. We've developed that specifically to help churches come alongside people, right now, starting with the pastors and the pastoral staff, and then helping the church deal with all the mental health problems that are going to be surrounding them, depression, anxiety, and addictions and all of this. So I go to churchesthatheal.com.
Okay.
And get that for your church. The other one of mine that I would probably strongly suggest right now is a book called Boundaries for Leaders.
Oh, that's the one that came to my mind. It's sitting on my bookshelf. That is such a great book.
It gets at these structures that are going to apply really, really strongly right now. And I think I wasn't even thinking about this before, but with the financial crisis, I think I actually started working on that book not too long after that crisis.
Isn't that interesting? Because one of the refrains, I'll get it slightly wrong. It was a couple of years ago I read it, but it's like you're ridiculously in control of your own life, right? Isn't that one of the refrains?
It actually says you're as a leader, you're ridiculously in charge.
In charge. Yep.
Yeah. And it has to do with leaders when they start to feel like helpless and powerlessness. And my people are they're freaking out on me, and the mood is bad and the culture is bad. Well, dude, if you're the leader, whatever you're finding, you're either creating that or you're allowing it to exist on your watch. So, wake up, come on, we can go do some stuff about that. And the book talks about the things that you can do. So
I love it. You've been so generous with your time again. Make sure those of you who are watching that you check out churchesthatheal.com. Dr. Henry Cloud, one of my favorite authors for decades. And I'm just so grateful for everything you're doing, all the way you're helping leaders. And thanks for spending time with us today.
It's great to be with you always. We'll see you next time. Maybe on the other end of this.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we'll be meeting face to face. That'd be a lot of fun.
Somebody might find the vaccine and the cure tomorrow. We don't know. I'm praying.
That'd be great, right? That'd be great.